What's up, guys? Welcome to the Big Serious Show. I've decided on a name, and it is the Big Serious Show because my nickname as a rookie in the NFL when I was playing with the Raiders was the Big Serious. I was very serious in the film room, on the field, wherever it was. Not to say that I still couldn't keep a good, witty sense of humor. I was just very focused on performing at my best, at optimizing my performance. So I wanted to soak it in, and hence my nickname. So I'm going to roll with the Big Serious as the name for this show. On the first episode, I had an awesome time speaking with Trevis Trevino. Trevis is a well-decorated coach within the Olympic sphere. He has won multiple gold medals, not himself, but through his athletes have won multiple gold medals. And we get a chance to talk about what it was like working with elite high performers like Michael Phelps. He also spent time working in Major League Soccer around guys like David Beckham, and just has been surrounded by incredibly high performers. So I wanted to dissect that a little bit. We talk about how important recovery was, how important just a mindset of growth is for those athletes. And then we also get a little bit into the nitty gritty of strength training and some of his favorites, some things that he thinks are getting kind of phased out. And we talk a little bit about the upcoming Olympics, talk about past Olympics. Travis is now going on his 12th year being a part of the Olympics. So we hit on a lot more in the show. So please listen to this thing from start to finish. It was just nuggets galore. And I hope you like it. I sure had fun talking to him. Anyway, here's the show. All right. Today I'm talking with Trevis Trevino. Trevis has an impressive resume, having worked with elite athletes and teams from the NBA, NHL, Major League Soccer, and Summer Olympic teams, including USA Swimming, basketball, track and field, and weightlifting. He also dedicates his experience to high-level collegiate, high-level high school, and young athletes nationwide, specializing in the recovery, nutrition, and performance. Trevis is a certified strength and conditioning specialist, sports nutrition specialist, and sports medicine specialist, as well as some other cool stuff like a rock tape functional movement therapist. And he is an awesome dude, and I'm happy to have him on the show that is not named yet. So the show has no name. Maybe we'll figure one out as we go on.
TBD.
Yeah, big time TBD on the show. And I feel you don't know what to name it until you get into it. But Travis, man, I appreciate you coming on and doing this. And I look forward to chatting.
This is awesome. This is awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. So let's jump right in, man. I think the coolest thing out of that resume is exactly what's on your shirt right there, man. And we got the Olympics coming up in the summer. How did you get involved with the Olympic teams?
So I was living in Orange County in Irvine, and I had moved out there to pursue a baseball career that failed after 1 year from shoulder injuries and every other injury. And I came from an environment where, as an outfielder, you just threw the ball all day long. Like, that was their method of getting you stronger. Just keep throwing it and keep throwing it as far as you can, and eventually you'll get better.
So a lot of thought put into that programming right there.
Yeah. So when I finally did get a call, it was one of those things that my first year you're trying to throw, and my body took a toll. I was 24, right around 23, 24. And when my shoulder tore, it was like Velcro. And when they did the surgery, it was one of those things where it was like, what happened to your arm? And I was like, I threw. I just threw. And but I was 24, 25, and I had my two boys were 1 and 3 at the time, and I'm like, I could barely pick them up. It was one of those things where I was like, I'm not going to be this guy that's going to be 25 and I can't even pick up my children, kind of thing. And that was a short-lived career of baseball. And I got into personal training, and personal training was what I knew, and from college and just learning through it. And I got a job at 24 Hour Fitness in Irvine, and they started me at the front desk because it was Orange County and you had to prove yourself. And I was like, I can do that. I was like, whatever. And we were in California, and Southern California was not cheap. So it's do or die kind of thing. When I can make some commission or whatever I got to do to start my entry, that's what I was going to do. And I was selling personal training as a front desk guy. I was just talking to people. I talked. I was like, what are your goals? How you doing? How's life? How's the personal training coming? Oh, you don't do personal training. Oh, you got to really meet our personal trainers. I was selling for our personal trainers more than the personal trainers were selling themselves. And one day our club manager came up to me and she was like, how do you want to be a trainer? And I was like, I've been waiting to be a trainer because I keep getting asked, why aren't you a trainer? It was one of those things. And so I started my journey as a personal trainer. And over the course, I think, of those year and a half, almost. Yeah, it was about 2006 going to 2007. I worked and I moved to every club that they would take me, from Orange County, the Inland Empire, LA, and I finally landed in like Rancho Cucamonga area. And one of my clients, her husband was the director of men's swimming. Backtrack, 2008, coming into the Seoul Games, 24 Hour Fitness was one of the sponsors. So
Okay.
24 Hour Fitness was like, we had the Biggest Loser. We had the Olympics when we sponsored with them. So there was always those ties where we had the ins. And she was like, no, you should really try to work. And I was like, I love that. But I was like, I don't know. In my head, I just was not educated or good enough to be like an intern, or that's just how my view was.
Yeah.
She didn't listen, and she got me an internship, and she's like, if you want it, it's yours. And I was like 3 months, and this was like the Olympic year. Now it's 2008. For 3 months I got coffee, I got papers, I did everything at the center in Chula Vista that I could ever imagine. I was doing everything and anything that probably wasn't even related to what I was doing, but I was just trying to make it in. 2008 came along, the Olympics happened. The department I was working with was track and field at the time because that's just what they gave me. And the job, there was no job openings. They said, we appreciate you, you work hard, whatever it is. Thanks for coming out, kind of thing. And the next day, I get a call from men's swimming, and one of the strength and conditioning coaches there at Chula Vista at the time was like, I have an entrance level for a tech. We hear you're good. We heard your work ethic, kind of thing, and we'd love to bring you, see if it's something you'd fit for on a 90-day kind of trial type thing. And I'm like, I would love that. I was like, I do want you to know, I don't know a thing about swimming. I was like, I don't know. I can swim myself, but I don't know. I was like, I don't know how much of an experience that is. But so they were like, no, don't worry about it. They're like, we got a good group of guys here. We had a good turnout in 2008. And I was like, okay. And I knew nothing about swimming in the world at the time. I started as like a tech, just helping people with exercises, helping the movements, helping things. And for 4 years, I worked as like a tech slash level one trainer, working with all the men's swim team. I would bounce around everywhere. The drive at the time, again, I'm living in Los Angeles, Inland Empire, driving to Chula Vista and San Diego. It's like driving from Grand Rapids to Chicago every day is what that
Jeez.
equivalent was. So there were nights I just slept in my car.
Yeah,
Like
man,
I
that's
was
a
like, I
haul,
got,
especially
it's a
dealing with
haul.
Southern California traffic. That's
Yeah, it was a grind. It
yeah,
was what I wanted and that's what I needed. And I had a family. And I was like, it's gonna be do or die, or I'm going back home. If I don't make it here, I'm going back home. And that's pretty much all we could do at the time. 2012 comes and our swimmers kill it. And they do amazing. And at the time I got the opportunity to work with men's basketball at those games because of an illness from one of the athletic trainers. And
okay.
so I filled in and our swimmers killed it. 2012 rolls around and they moved me up through the rankings again. And I started now hitting basketball and I started working with swimming at that same time. In my off season, when we weren't in there, I was working with the Galaxy, which we had a squad. That's when Beckham was there and I had all those guys there and Landon Donovan was out there. And
Yeah, that had to have been
um,
crazy because that was like like the
it was
first
like
splash. That was like the big splash move that for like MLS when they got
yeah,
back over to
yep.
the US and
Yeah, it was a huge thing. Actually, my middle son is named after Landon Donovan. He was his godfather.
oh wow.
So it was one of those things where we were close.
Yeah,
And
How was Beckham as a dude, by the way? I was gonna
he's a
say I watched that
he's
whole series on Netflix, I think it was, where like told his story and it was
yeah,
fascinating. So
he's a great man. He's great. Him and Victoria were great, and I had the awesome chance of getting to work with them and stuff like that. So it was awesome. It was sweet. And soccer was a different world. And now that I had a son that plays soccer, back then I didn't know anything, so it was cool learning that stuff. And so 2012 to 2016, I would say the peak of men's swimming was that time. We were like coming off of London. I don't even know how many gold medals our team had won. Coming into Rio was just going to be like primed. You had Phelps, you had Lochte, you had our relay teams were just on point. Like it was just going to
yeah,
be,
it was an all-star lineup. I remember
oh,
watching those games because that was when I was in college and that was during football training camp. And so we would be done for the night when all the big races would come on.
yeah,
And there was just so much hype on it. And it was so fun. It was so high energy. Like
It was,
It was like the main event. If the nation could rally behind one team, it felt like that swim team was it.
yeah. And the reason I think every country hates us in competition was because of that men's swimming program. We
Good,
just,
good.
I was like, the amount of times that our national anthem played just continuously over the speakers because of the medal presentations. And I was like, yep, I was like dominant. I don't think there's really ever going to be another dominant program when it came through there. And I was just lucky to be part of it. And that's what was cool. 2016 comes along when I start moving up the rankings and I started working as more of a assistant, I guess you could say director role at this time. Now I'm more familiar. Granted, you got to think the average lifespan of an Olympic employee is maybe 4 years. I'm now going into year 8 for this kind of thing. And it's a grind. It's a grind. And the one thing that I don't think people fully realize is the dedication that it takes for staff, the sacrifices they make and stuff like that, because you're working 4 years for what, 10 seconds, 11 seconds, whatever your race is going to be, a
Yeah.
minute at the most,
Yeah,
so
your season is a few weeks. You
yeah.
prep for 4 years, season's a few weeks, actual competition you can break down to minutes and seconds.
And that's the thing is like during trials, injury, it's like the worst thing. It's like you plan, it's like you get hurt 3 months in that window and you're pretty much done. It's awful when it comes to that, but the stress and that pressure is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I know I mean, just like playing in the NFL, like week to week on Sunday, nobody's ever 100%. You're always playing through things. And I got to imagine like when it gets close to that competition after 4 years, I'm sure you guys have a plan in place, just like our staff had a plan in place to get you ready. But no matter how much you can get ready, you still have things that are dinged up, and it's hard to be at that 100%. Like
It really,
what were some of the things that you guys would do with the athletes?
yeah,
Role.
definitely. The biggest thing is your recovery. Recovery is huge. And I think the reason that I learned so much, or that I chose to learn so much about soft tissue, the cupping world blew up in Rio. Everybody saw the marks.
You do those marks,
20,
they're great advertisers right
they're,
there.
yeah, they're great
See those big old
advertisers.
marks, you're like, what are
Yep.
those? What are
Yeah.
those?
Oh my gosh. It was the KT tape in London and it was the cupping and things that have been around for the centuries. And it's funny because we literally would say, like, when we were cupping, you're like, oh, you think people are going to ask about this? We're like, nah, it's been around for centuries. Sure enough, NBC the next morning just shows Phelps's cups on there. And I'm like, yep, I guess they didn't know.
Yeah.
uh,
When you're up in the starting blocks or getting
yeah,
ready for
it's
the
just,
race and he's doing his warm up there and they're zooming in on his back, it's
it's like,
hard
there
not
it
to
is.
notice that.
Yeah. So you really look at peak performance and you progress to that peak performance when it comes to your workouts, but the recovery and mobility. And here's the thing, that we call it the yin yang theory. You need a little bad to help balance out the good. And what I mean by that is you need a little tightness in your body to get that spring effect. As much as we spend, or you see all the mobility or you see all the stuff, sometimes being too mobile or too flexible can be a bad thing for some athletes. It is what it is. It's one of those things that it's like, how much tightness can you go with that it's not going to pull a muscle, but how much laxicity do you need so that it relaxes it? And that's
Right.
really, I think, the hardest thing is, you only get one shot to get that balance right because they
Yeah.
got, the trial or whatever it is. You don't get week upon week to figure it out. It's like you trial run it and then you hope that, the combination of what soft tissue, nutrition, insulin timing, carb timing, getting them peak, getting their brain, our psychology team to do sleep. So many factors come into these things. And a lot of it people think is, oh, it's how strong I am. And I'm like, it's not really how strong you are. It's about how fast you recover and how smooth and efficient you are in leading to that. And I think slowly the world has progressed to what seeing the recovery. Now we have resources, we have Normatec, we have red light therapy cupping, we have dry needling, we have acupuncture, we have general cupping. You see all the apps when it comes through there, which they're all great resources, but it's like, how do you use them? And I think that's where the level of education, when people ask what separates the people on the everyday promoting a movement or a leg to like the professionals that do it, is how do you take all of those things and actually configure them so that athlete is at their peak 100% when that race day comes. And that's what I think separates the professionals from just the people that show the exercises and do it for everyday living.
Yeah. So you guys almost had to create an algorithm based off of all those
Yeah.
variables. What do you
Yeah.
think? What was like the number one? Like, it's hard to say number one variable, but I guess if there are one or two like underlying variables that could not be compromised in the algorithm, it would be what?
Yeah. I would think nutritionally, carb timing was huge for swimming and even track and field. Carb timing and insulin output, how much sugar, what your sugar levels were before and after races were huge. We were testing sugar before races and after races immediately. In the locker room, before you saw them on TV, they're getting sugars checked. We're spiking it to an exact number that we wanted or that we felt we needed to make sure that the peak performance was like there.
And what were you
And
guys just
then,
doing, like finger prick testing, or did you ever have them wear
yeah,
like the continuous glucose monitors or?
sometimes they had the continuous ones when it was training, but then it was the finger pricks when it came through that kind of stuff. And it's funny because then you would see like afterwards, the swimmers always had like chocolate cake, or they always had the thing that people are like, what are those? Or the Snickers bars. And I'm like, we're just trying to replenish sugar. Like
Yeah.
sugar dropped, and that's the quickest way we know to get them because we have to be back in an hour or whatever it was to get them ready for their next event, for the next meet, I guess you could say.
No,
Um,
no complaints about chocolate cake. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah.
gonna eat it.
What's even funnier is that people would ask where our food came from. We actually would fly our food in from the US. We never use like local food. Like our athletes, we tried it in London and it stopped. We're like, yep, we're shipping all of our own food with us. So
Yeah.
all
So
of
you can just completely control that variable. Cause I got to imagine
yeah,
it's nuts. Like you have so many, like such an influx of people in that city, and to
yeah.
rely, like to have such
And
a huge part of it come down to someone that you're just blindly to provide
trusting
your
to make
food.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They haven't put
And
nearly the amount of time that you guys have into it. And you're like, all right.
yep. And whether it was good or bad, it was what their bodies knew. And that's what I tell people. And that's where the things is that they needed the normal and the psychological aspect. When you asked about that second thing, the psychological aspect of it was huge because those little variables could throw them off just enough. Think about how many swimming meets we saw that were decided by what, a few tenths of a second.
Yeah.
And that's the difference when it comes to psychological aspects of like how much of this stuff are they really make sure they're zoned in on and get their head clear. And that's definitely a big challenge for the big events too. That now with the mental focuses, the different outputs, I'm sure you've used them in the NFL, it was like the different like how to get your nervous system in your head to just chill.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you bring the food thing up too, because that was like one of my like biggest pet peeves, like playing, was when we would travel before a game and you're at the mercy of the hotel food
Tell
for like your biggest like meal prep. And it sometimes the hotels would do a nice job, other times it'd be terrible. Like whenever
yeah,
we'd go play in Buffalo, the food would inevitably be like horrible. Like the hotels that you can stay at there, there's just not a huge selection. And the ones that we did, it was like the food was just atrocious. And you're
yeah,
just
and you
trying
relied on
to,
it, man.
yeah, it's
I
tough.
I knew what hotels always had the good food and what hotels, just like which ones had the good beds and which one had the good pillows. I had
Yeah.
a list.
Yeah.
I had a list my whole life about what that needed.
What's your top
Yeah.
one? What's your favorite place?
That I'm still and I don't endorse any of them, but I'm still a fan of the Hilton groups when it comes to overall. Their their pillow systems are still hitting great, but the Marriott food was always what our their weight rooms were always enough for us to get through
Perfect.
there. Yep. Yep. And we always look for a 24-hour fitness or a crunch fitness. But if not, like I at least knew that some of those weight rooms were at least enough for us to get what we needed to do when we traveled locally. And
Yeah.
then I did when I did a stint within the NBA and working there, it was the same thing.
Oh yeah, because you
It
guys are on
was
the road you guys are in the road or on the road
all the
you're
time.
always
Yeah,
traveling.
all the time. It's nonstop when it's like anything, and it's you have to just meticulously plan out all of your hotel visits, foods, whatever they're bringing, whatever you're bringing. Yeah, it's definitely a job in its own. Definitely to plan it.
Yeah, it always seemed like the lady who was in charge of the food ordering and administration always seemed like she was putting out fires running around the hotel the day before the
Yeah,
game and then pregame. Back to then the psychological preparation, psychological recovery. Like I remember And then there's memes about it. Phelps with his headphones on, looking like a Jedi about to go into battle with the hood up and
Yeah.
just getting in the zone. Like, what were some of the ways the guys prepared, not just going into it, but specifically before the competition, like when it was the moment of truth? How would they get their minds?
Yeah. And that was where like chiropractic was huge. The vagal nerve and the nervous system and your fight or flight responses and making sure that was like set prior to that. Because when you could get that to just relax mentally, you could get everything else to focus on through there. A lot of it was routine. And most athletes have a routine, whether it's a superstition or a routine, that's what gets them. They eat the same thing, they wake up at the same time, they have the same routine. They need their body to just swimming is a very in most sports, but they're very muscle memory. Goes through the process like it's another day. Our psychology team would have talks. I always wondered sometimes what some of those talks were about. I never got to fully sit in on all of them. But like the music that those guys would listen to would range from country to like the hard, just like Slipknot, the
Yeah.
Disturbs, the things in the world. And then you have the guy that needed classical music, and it was like Beethoven and Mozart going through there. And then you had the ones that are just your hip hop. It's funny how the what music people adjust to. And I feel like they've done studies on like how it affects people in like their calmness or like their environments. But that was always, I always ask people, I'm like, what are you listening to? What's
Yeah.
in there? It was always weird to me. I was like, what is that? Yeah.
Yeah. What was Phelps listening to then right there when he was just looking like he was
Yeah.
about to
Just
take you out?
hard. It was always just hard music. It was always just like, just the combinations of, I think I learned most about like heavy metal from some of those guys like him because I was like, what is this? Slipknot, Disturbed,
Just ready to unleash the beast.
just unleash it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we had one swimmer who would listen to French R&B. Don't know how he got there.
Just that was
Introduced
his
to it.
thing
So
though.
yeah, that
Just
was his
French
thing. It was
R&B.
I couldn't even tell you what the name of the band is. I feel like I have the music somewhere in an app, like somewhere stored somewhere in my life. But yeah, it was just like a French R&B music. We would have coaches at the training centers that would train under the heavy rock rap. And then we had other coaches that would train under like classical. And they would get you to calm yourself down through that fight or flight system and your nervous and your parasympathetic and sympathetic systems and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it definitely was it was an arrange. It was a range of
No, it definitely is. And it's crazy because just working out, you put on different music or you put on no music at all. It's totally different because some days I go back in there and I'll be listening to a book on Audible or a podcast. And most days I'm listening to music. But sometimes
yep.
when it's really interesting. If you got like a podcast that is like really applicable to something that's going on in your life, I feel it's almost like energizing in a way. It's weird because it's just words.
Yeah.
But
It's
if
just
it's firing you up while you're working out, like you get a great workout in, which is bizarre because you're just
yeah.
listening to someone talk.
Yeah. It's the guy that listens to no music. I always tell people those are the ones that scare me because I'm like, you're on a mission for something.
That's hard.
You're
Like,
working through some stuff. You're working through some
yes,
stuff right
I
now.
just need to
Yeah.
go I just need a quiet corner and I need to get
Yeah.
some stuff out. Just
Yeah. Man, you got some issues. You're working through some things. Leave him alone. Put him in the corner.
now,
Like, yeah.
what's your go to when you're working out?
I'm definitely a more rock. I'm definitely the Disturbed Linkin Park.
Yeah,
I won't lie. That's something that kind of works through me, especially on leg days. I'm like, okay, this is what I gotta get through there. And I feel like my Pandora stations and my Apple Music stations have evolved over so many years of playlists. I even had them down to one day of like arm day. This is what I'm doing. This is my music for this leg day. This is what I need.
it's perfect, man. Hey, different groups need different categories
Different
of music.
environments.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I'm definitely not listening to any kind of EDM if I'm doing leg day, but if I'm trying
Yeah.
to get like some kind of like just a heavy cardio circuit going in there, like I'm listening to
Yep.
something with a fast beat. But yeah,
Yep.
I'm with you on the rock stuff. Like I
Yeah.
usually crank up like some Rise Against or let's
Yeah.
see, what's
You
another?
give me a PO, you give me like a POD. You give me, man, even Feeling Benjamin. I've
Yeah.
had some of that stuff in
Yeah.
there.
I feel like
Yep, yep.
My Metallica Pandora station has got a lot of refinement through likes and dislikes, where it's
Yeah,
pretty good for most lift
it's
days. And it's always funny when my wife walks in there and back
just
into
what
the
are
weight
you?
room, and she's, "What are you listening to?" And I'm like, "Hey,
Yeah,
this is what gets it done."
yeah, yeah. This is what it happens, and some days are different than the others, and that's how those guys function. And that's where you have to definitely be adaptable to everybody. Everybody had a different way to get them, like either to calm down, and then you had those guys that would like you have athletes that need to be perfectly calm going into their race. And then you have other ones that, like, if they don't have the feeling of just adrenaline running through them all the time, it's like, it's just not going to work. And it's so weird to me how they can do the same thing from two different avenues. Well, I think that's where our
Yeah.
psychology team, I'm like, man, you guys are
Was
good.
there, have you always noticed there's always one guy too that's everybody's really serious getting ready for everything, and then you have one guy who's always just like messing with the rest of the guys. Just
Oh,
like,
dude,
you need that
that
guy
was
that's keeping it light, like going around messing with everybody. The guy looks like he's got not a care in the world, and he just goes out and crushes it, and that's just who he is. Was there
that
always that
was
guy?
there was, and I was that guy myself. Like I was the one during baseball that was messing around in practice, but I was always like when the coach tried to light me up, I was like, I did it.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was the thing was is those guys, and we had those coaches, I was that coach. It'd be serious, and I'm the one that like always had the improper comments, or I would say something and I'd be like, why'd I say that? Everybody's laughing, and yeah. So now as like a director, I still have that. And now it's man, it's but the thing is with those guys, what people don't realize is they're usually the first ones in the gym and the last ones to leave. So it's like they're always their work ethic is one of those things that you could just never say anything. It was just while they're there, they were just they kept it light. They knew when it had to turn on, and it was generally like 7 seconds before their whatever they had to do did, and then it was like switch, and then all of a sudden like they were zoned in. But I think that's what kept them. For me, it's what kept me not thinking about what I had to do. But then you always had the dude with the hoodie in the corner, not talking to anybody. We never said anything to him. Just,
Yeah.
yep,
Like
leave him be.
not poking that bear.
Yep, yep. And then there was me just messing around to this day, the high pressure moments, and nope. I was like, I got to keep it light. Got to keep it light.
So when you guys are going through like the strength program for these different teams, what are some of the common staples that are used pretty much by everybody? The swimming teams, basketball teams, track and field. And when I say
Yeah,
things that they have in common, I'm mostly talking about like core lifts.
yeah, definitely. Okay, great question. I think our big core lifts, I mean, you see the cleans, you see the Olympic lifts are always a core, your cleans, I think are our big one. Um, we would definitely take a squat into our movements, but it's always modified based on the individual. I think the squats that are done in the NBA versus the squats that you'll see in like gymnastics are going to be two different forms. The focus, the depth, the engagement is going to be a whole different aspect to it, but that lift is still the core movement. Pull-ups, weirdly, people are always like pull-ups, and I'm like, it does a lot. I was like, for a body, especially an upper body swimmer, pull-ups are huge. It's a big activator and deactivator of certain muscles around the lats, the rear delts, the shoulder lines. How those bodies engage, how you activate a core are always a big one that we test on. Ones that I think we veer away from are deadlifting. You don't
Yeah.
see it as much. It's just not needed for us. It's not really needed. There are times where people want to go deadlift their butts off it, but it's just not something that's needed. And a lot of times it's done improperly, mechanically, to real fine tuning.
Good.
And
Glad you say that because I stink at deadlifts, and I'm always jealous when you see like the just like the most average looking dude posting a deadlift video and they're just pulling ridiculous weight up, and you're like, how are you doing that? Like,
yeah, yeah. And that's where like that theory of I feel like those guys are just deadlifting. And I see it at my gym now that I go to. There's always the dude that's deadlifting like 4 days a week. And I'm like, I hope that you're like competing. I really hope that you're competing and not just doing this to go back to your job at Verizon Wireless. Like I really hope that there's a purpose for you deadlifting this much because I'll outside of you trying to lift cars, I don't know another movement that it replicates in terms of why, what else would you be doing it? Like, unless it's required for your job. I really hope that there's a reason. And we just don't because it's done. Like you said, things people think of deadlift, and it's like, I don't want to do 15 reps of deadlifts. I want to do five, and then I want to lift heavy. And a lot of times, height of our swimmers, height of an NBA player, like trying to get them that low, keeping that, it's so much harder that I'm like, there are so many things we can replicate
Yeah,
for your sport that just aren't needed
no
in
doubt.
forms of a dev. Yeah. And I feel, and everybody's going to have their own opinion on that kind of stuff. And we just find better results from cleans, different forms of squats when it comes to like our knee and hip hinge movements.
And
Um,
when you guys are like programming, do you try to stick mostly to like strength capacity to where you're in that low rep range, or do you try to balance it with some higher rep hypertrophy training as well?
Yeah, we definitely will balance that. We think of it in terms of a pyramid, and your base of your foundation pyramid is going to be your core focuses around your hips, your butt, lower back, and lower ab stability. The focus of that core focus when we come into a new athlete coming into a new season, let's just say from day one, it's really trying to improve their balance, their stability, their hand-eye coordination, and then the overall muscle endurance of the body. So how much they can output in terms of the percentages that we need them at. And once we feel that those dysfunctions are fixed and those dysfunctions are the protagonist, antagonists are working together, the front to back, top to bottom, left to right, whatever we have to do, that we get into hypertrophy. We call into a phase one where we're slowly introducing some of these lifts of maybe it's going to be like a bench squat or a dumbbell squat. We're trying to get some mechanics going. We're really trying to teach the mechanics of this is what you focus on. This is where your pivot points are. This is how you're moving, breaking down so that when we get to that level two hypertrophy, we can really maximize that percentage of one rep max. And everything is done on a percentage. It's
Yeah.
never a guessing weight. We know exactly what weight we need to hit at what rep range. And then those phases run 4 to 6 weeks. And then at the very end of it, we get into some heavy stuff. We get into that 5 rep, 4 rep, 3 rep range, and you start seeing some of those heavier cleans, those heavier squats. But we don't do it long. There's one, the body hurts after a while. And two, it's hey, let's just get back down and we reevaluate. And you think about it, it's like that pyramid of we're just building that base and trying to get that stronger so that your tip of your pyramid can get higher. But a
So you,
lot of the reason it can get bigger is because that base is just so much wider.
yeah, which makes a lot of sense. So it's like you build that base up with like functional hypertrophy training and then build on top of that with some really good strength capacity
Yep.
and then repeat it almost. So you're just almost like
Reanalyze
that
it.
bake, like you're just trying to widen that base to get a taller peak almost, right? You
Yeah.
can't, if the base is only this wide, your peak's only like that. But if the base is this wide, then your peak's going way up. Is that kind of a good
Ex-
way to look at it?
Yeah, and we always tell people it's like if you owned a house and you wanted a bigger home, they don't put a bigger roof on it. They
Right.
put a bigger foundation in your house. And that's what we think about in bodies is that's exactly what we're doing. So when it comes to overall the heaviness of lifts, realistically, it's a small portion. It's that midsection to really dysfunctional training, finding what your body is lacking is where so much of your time is spent for high level athletes. And because again, when you get to that level, the changes that you're seeing are so minimal. 1% of a change can be a huge difference for those guys. We're not teaching the average person how to bench, and all of a sudden a month later, he's, oh, I got 50 pounds on my max. At this point, it's we can increase 5 pounds in something. It's great because we got so nitpicky at this point. We're just seeing the little increases, and we got to do a bunch of the little things so that when they perform, it's a game of inches when it comes to us at that high level. And that's the big difference too when it comes to the Olympic stuff is that you only get one chance. And so every little increment forward is going to be the difference sometimes for some people between gold and silver.
Yeah.
And
You're just
that's
chasing
that
those fractions of percentages. And I
it
get it,
is. And
man.
you
That's what,
get picky.
yeah.
Yeah.
You have to get
You
picky. Like you have to be like you have to have that mindset. Like I'm going to be picky. I'm going to get that that fractional percentage, because like you said, it's the difference. It's the difference
It's yeah,
between gold, silver.
silver or Olympic trials and not making a team for some, or things like that. It's huge when it comes to that kind of stuff. And on our end, that stress is high
Oh yeah,
because you got to make sure your percentages are like even
dialed
even
in.
though yeah, even the work I do now when people's bodies like I dissect it and I was like, and I get like when I'm not in front of the Olympic world, I'm just helping the everyday person. I'm like, okay, I probably shouldn't be so technical. Gotta just get you level one here, but it's we keep striving. And one, you don't get bored. You always got something to work on. And nowadays, you look at the exercises that are out there, and there's hundreds and thousands of exercises that we can do. But how many times are we showing how to treat the dysfunction? Where is the body coming off of it versus just showing how to do the exercise? And I think that's the big thing for us is that we have to analyze so in depth every movement, every repetition. And then when we get it, we got to make sure that it's replicated hundreds of times then from then on out.
And then I'm guessing then the athlete that is working with you also has to constantly keep a growth mindset because there's new stuff being fed in. The program is always changing. The program is there, but there's always little tweaks here and there's new things being brought in because you're trying to chase those fractions for them. And for them to succeed, they need to chase those fractions. So I imagine it's really hard to be an elite athlete and be closed off mentally saying, nope, I'm just doing this. This is what works for me. I'm just going to go do my own thing. I imagine those guys have very little success.
Yeah, they don't because you have to be taught. These athletes, our athletes, my athletes, all of ours, they know exactly why they're doing what they're doing. They know every point of pressure on their foot, to their heel, to their hip, to their joint, to their shoulder, to their breathing. Every rep is exactly like the last one. And I think that's the difference too between a high level performance trainer versus maybe someone that's not is because we teach. We don't just tell someone what to do. We teach them why they're doing this at such a high level because if they're not engaging the right muscle internally, they're creating a dysfunction within themselves. When if they're not loading off the right muscle group and they don't know why they're having to do it, it takes a whole different role on how you perform as an athlete and perform. And I think that was my biggest thing that I really wanted to give back, or that I now the youth athletes that I get to work with now a little bit here in my off seasons when I do get to work with them is teaching them this is why we do this. I want you to be able to go anywhere in the country at any school. And if your next trainer, your next coach, your next everything asks, why do you do this? You can be like, I do this because I'm in phase 2 of my hypertrophy phase and I got to hit this type of rep and I'm trying to build this type of muscle. And this is what my goal is because that way my next phase is going to be this. When you hear an athlete tell you that, and I've seen it. I've gotten athletes from other coaches and other people and other teams and other things. And you go to them and you're like, what are you doing? He's, I don't know. Just the dude told me to do this and that's what I did. And then you look at the high level athletes of these worlds, not even the Olympic world, but the NBA, the NFL, I'm sure. Those are the athletes that when you ask them why they're doing what they're doing, they know exactly why they're doing what they're doing. They know exactly what it is that they need to do and why. Because those are the coaches that are sitting there training and teaching. They're
Yeah.
teaching and they're instilling that. And luckily our whole world at the Olympic Center is that. We get to teach. And then I'm fortunate enough that when I am out of the center, I get to teach locally and build people from there.
And it's like across the board, it applies to everything, like every phase that I've been a part of athletically, like in high school, the guys who were really good and high performing had that mindset. They knew the why at the time, why they were doing it. They were on board with it. There was buy-in. The guys who didn't really care about understanding it and just were there. There's a distinct separation between those two with the success they have. Then you go to college and you see the same thing. And even you go to the NFL and you see the same thing. Like the guys who were really in tune with it, understood it, knew what it was doing for them. Like those guys had a lot of success. The guys that didn't really care, it almost seemed like that little fraction of not caring, not wanting to know why would show up in other areas outside of just the performance training as well. And then cumulatively, that led to poor performance on the field or just average performance. And if your performance is average in whatever team you're on, you're not going to advance or you're not going to reach the top of your athletics.
Yeah. Or you're going to get hurt. The little injuries. Think about
Yeah.
the little
Well, and if you're
hamstring.
hurt, you're definitely not getting to the top because you're not playing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You're not there. And it's huge. And I think that's really where my focus has been is knowing why you're doing it and making sure that you're doing it right. When we always there's a big sign in our center that says listen, and it's a big thing because if you listen, when you know what you're doing, everything kind of falls too. And it takes that trust, I think, in your coaches and your strength team that if we do what we're supposed to and we trust that they know what they're doing, I think that's a huge factor also, that you really have to trust that we're knowledgeable enough or we're educated enough or we're out there enough, and not just on book on paper, but also just the function. I might have not always been the smartest guy in the room, but every athlete trusted exactly what I was going to say because my passion for them to succeed was I was going to outwork anybody. And I think that's the one thing for me, and treated like an athlete, like you yourself. You had to work at a certain high level to get where you were at. It didn't just come and a job and you just did it and mindlessly you got advanced through it. It's like you have to have a certain level. And so same for us to be at that level. We were, if we weren't athletes ourselves or we were mentally in school or doing things in our field and personal training, like I said, I was sleeping in my car. I was the one functioning on 4 hours of sleep and a gram of caffeine every single day just to get myself to focus and be what was best. And it was what was needed at the time. And then I busted my butt. And then once you get there, you don't let off. And that's the thing too. I think sometimes too, and I've seen this in pro sports, is guys get there and then they
yeah,
taper off a little bit.
I've arrived like that. I've
Yeah.
arrived mindset kind of like whoop, your growth mindset shut down now. Like you
Yeah.
think you're there and you're going to plateau. If you
Yeah.
think you've arrived, that means that you're where you're going to be and you're not going to keep ascending.
Yep. It
Like,
is. And it's, yeah, like you said, I honestly think that it's harder to maintain these spots than it is to get there. Because when you are getting there, you're driven. You're mentally like, this is what I have my goal. But when you make it, it's like now sustainability. It's like the long term you have to think about, and how am I going to grind every day? And you got the guys like LeBron that are working on their recovery every single day. Patrick does it with the Chiefs. Look at Phelps. His focus was longevity in his career and how much he got to swim over those many years. And it's those are the guys that really get it, I think, in my head. They see what the Tom Brady's of the world and keeping him healthy, or all those kind of guys that
yeah,
are
like
just,
even like Beckham, like who you were
yeah,
able to work with early
yeah.
on in your career. Like those, I'm
And
sure he was the same way.
you look at them now and they're still healthy. Those guys could
Yeah.
still perform to a certain level of certain things. They still keep themselves like that. That mindset just, it never left them. It never left them once. And I think that was, like you said, we're definitely the 1% in the world when it comes to that training of those athletes. And I think that's where it's a huge mental game when it comes to that kind of self-talk, self-reliability, just accountability within yourself. And you apply that hopefully into other parts of your life, and I think it's just going to take off from
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
No
So
doubt.
it's,
It becomes universal. So
yeah.
if there's like a high schooler out there, or maybe not even a high schooler, it could be a college kid, could be someone who's just getting into training. I think pull-ups, pretty self-explanatory, squats, fairly self-explanatory. They can go on, get tutorials or figure it out. But cleans, like you said, cleans right away. Cleans are very technical. And I'm sure you're with me in saying if you don't know how to do a clean and don't have someone coaching you through it, beware because there's a lot going on. What are some other movements where you're getting that triple extension and that power and explosion like you do with a clean, but there is much smaller risk involved and just intuitively it is easier to teach, but has some of those same benefits?
Yeah, and I think with a clean, like you said, it's so many movements. And I would say as a high school, as anybody lifting, and I say it because even there are adults that are getting new into their health and fitness later on in life, learning your hinges, learning hinge points is huge. Learning what a hip hinge, a knee hinge, and even like an ankle hinge does to a movement is huge. Because if you can get your hip hinge and your knee hinge down, you can pretty much master any leg movement that there is. And just understanding what is what. I would say if you're someone that wants to get into a clean, look at your RDL. Learning what the RDL is and the 3 points of contact when you're at a hip hinge versus a bench squat, where it's a knee hinge movement, and it's going to be completely different in terms of the mechanics of that. RDLs are still some of my favorite exercises when done right and efficiently. It definitely teaches you how to get your brain and body to connect, because you have to engage low back, hamstrings, foot placement, screw the heels in, things like that. And it forces your brain to really focus on things, and you can modify that movement to a very low risk or a very athletic performance based movement, all within an RDL. I think that's a huge one when it comes to there. Same thing with upper body. When you look at shoulder hinges and elbow hinges, look at bicep to tricep movements when it comes to an elbow hinge, and not engaging that elbow through the process, or bench pressing to rowing, where the shoulders are in alignment, stuff like that. So much of the stuff focuses around the hinge. We spend so much time with athletes teaching them joint hinge movements. That's the biggest thing that I would say. My always advice to anybody getting into it: learn those two hinge points, because one, your injury rates are going to be ridiculous. And then two, you're going to really learn about a lot about how your body moves and where some of that dysfunction is definitely going to be.
Would the best way be to go on to like YouTube and look for a video of someone just breaking down mechanics of the hinge itself? Don't really look for someone just doing a ton of weight and trying to tell you how to do it as they're sweating in the gym. More so someone breaking it down with an athlete and then trying to really learn and then go and apply. And it's interesting because when the proprioception stuff, like where you think your body is in space when you're starting to learn a new movement, is tricky, especially with hinges. Cause I work out with different people and the hinge is tricky. Like if someone's not really used to hip hinging, like you see a lot of like overextension in the neck, or you just don't see the plane of movement that they think that they're doing. And so I always thought that if someone is trying to learn it and they're really, serious about their performance and they want to get better at it, like being able to film yourself, like just set your phone up. And now people don't have to be self-conscious about that, even if they're going to the gym, because everyone's like filming themselves working out and stuff. So,
Yeah,
if they
right.
were to set a phone up and just be able to analyze that movement, I feel like that would be a pretty solid way to be like, oh man, I thought that I was using a proper neutral spine here, but I can see now from my recording that I was way too overextended, or maybe I was still had some flexion in the spine when I was doing it, and I got to iron that out. Are there any other kind of good resources or good like tips for learning those things?
Yeah, and I always find that on, especially on YouTube, because I've sent some videos to people. Weirdly enough, a lot of physical therapists, sports physical therapists, teach great hinge movements, because generally they're teaching those same things during injury. Our PT groups that I've always worked with have always been great at teaching the proper mechanics of hinge movements to prevent injury. And because that's what they're generally trying to do. And then the performance coach can teach that hinge point for load and with weight load. But the mechanics and the basics, I looked at things like, and you see now on like social media, like Squat University has great content when it comes through there. There's a couple of sports PTs that are out there that utilize some of those basics. And when someone's, what would I look at? It's like teaching the basics of a hinge. You just look up hip hinge, knee hinge, proper hinge points in terms of a clinical aspect, not just a performance. Learn it on a clinical aspect, because it's going to really make you dissect your own body. There are apps out there too. I feel like there's like posture screens that you can set up, and it'll scan you as you're doing a movement, and then it'll tell you. My favorite one, actually, I always tell people you can do this at home. If you have two scales, stand on them and go through your movements. You'll learn real quick where your weight shifts through each movement, because the scale weight will tell you right where it's at. And that's like a big thing that we do at the center, is like, how do you squat RDL on a scale and keep yourself within 5 pounds of grace the whole time? There's a huge movement.
Yeah, that's an awesome hack right there. It's like a little
Yeah.
DIY force plate almost.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's great. It's great. Just standing on it for some people. You see so many chiropractors that practice that in terms of left and right bodies, but man, it can tell you a huge difference on your body when you're more than 3 pounds, 5 pounds. Some guys, I'm sure people are 10, 12 pounds different. They're just loading into one side. And so they might learn to lift, but if they're always constantly balanced out or not improperly balanced, you're creating such a dysfunction in itself at the core. It's
And if and
great
if
though.
and if you're a young athlete, you might as well learn how to do it. If you're a young athlete who's really serious and you have goals and you want to continue to play your sport in college or maybe professionally one day,
Oh yeah.
take the time to learn how to do it. Build up your base. Don't just skip
Yep.
over it because you're one of the best guys on your team. Because you get to that
Yeah.
next level and it's going to be harder for you. So, you know,
Yep. And it's everybody's going to be the best guy in their team. When you get
yeah,
up even every level, it just gets to the point of, and especially for young athletes, man, when I teach a hinge point, it's 3 months before I'm even loading weight into that bar. They're at the bar or less broomsticks, and they'll drill it and I'll drill it and I'll drill it until they're so sick of it. And I'm like, that you can just do it effortlessly. And I was like, I promise you, 12 weeks or 8 weeks of just doing these basic mechanics over the course of your life is such a small fragment in your lifting life that it's going to teach the mechanics. It's like track and field with A skip and B skip and C skip, and track athletes warm up. 90% of their sport is just warming up. And then they run for 10 seconds and then it's okay, cool. Warm up, cool down, warm up. That's all it is. And they've just done it such to a point so many times that it's just ingrained into them. And I think that's where the hinge movements have to really be for these athletes in general, is learning that stuff. And I think we really got to take it. And I think it takes some of that is getting into it at the middle school level, teaching that stuff, the balance, the stability, the coordination of their bodies, and teaching them how to coordinate is such a huge thing. Because you're right. You see it in the NFL, you probably have seen it in the NBA, seen the Olympics. You get adults that get into lifts, and you're like, "What in the heck? Where did you learn that?" When
yeah,
they learned one thing and just stuck with it, and they didn't even realize that it was off that whole time.
yeah. It's which is then becomes hard to reverse it and
Yeah,
unteach the what's going on
what you're,
mechanically to build it back up. So might as well figure out how to do it right when you're starting.
yeah,
It'll pay off in the
exactly,
end.
exactly.
All right, so we're like under 2 months from Paris in the
Yeah,
2024 Summer Games. What are you most looking forward to about it?
man, I want to get through these trials. I got about a month left. And the hard thing for me is that I got to remember myself that when you get to these games, you have to take it in. It's a different world to work during these than go in as a spectator and watch them. Sometimes I forget to actually look around and take it in. Closing
Yeah,
ceremonies, opening ceremonies. You're just so caught up in what has to happen tomorrow or what has to happen during the
yeah,
races that I think that biggest thing for me is I got to remember that you just got to
yeah.
take it in sometime.
Stay present, and
Yeah,
soak it all
man,
up.
get and try to, and you get, like I said, I get such a tunnel vision. I take that, what I do, so zoned in that there are times that I think I left Rio with 11 pictures in my phone. Like it was just never even thought in my mind. I was so like
Yeah,
zoned in the whole time. And I think it's great though, man. Like I said, and it's great because I think we're such a great country when it comes to the sport and the athletes and stuff like that. And it's just knowing that we're going to kill it when we're evolving some of these sports and stuff like that. And the, the overall appreciation I think that we get from it as a country and brings us together into that aspect is awesome. It's definitely great to be part of that. And I'm going now on my 16th year. It's crazy. And then what's everything we've worked for in terms of there. And now that I oversee performance, it's one of those things where now I get a little bit of all the athletes. So all of their success is now a little bit of mine because now I'm just teaching more than I am doing, kind of thing, and trying to leave that legacy a little bit. And these are the big show. This is what we spent the last 4 years of thick, thin headaches, trial, tribulation, and everything, man, is now 6 weeks away, and it's go time. It's now we go. And I think that's what in itself is crazy for us.
It's got to be a rush. It's got to be fun. I want to have you back on,
Yeah.
like maybe October. And yeah, man, a little debrief, hear some good stories,
Oh, oh, I
and
got
talk
those for
about it, man,
days.
because it's got to be pretty interesting, pretty fun. There's got to just be some crazy, unexpected, you wouldn't believe this if I told you type of things.
Yeah.
And that's
Yep.
awesome,
It
man.
is,
I mean,
man. It's crazy.
it's cool to be a part of that as a former professional athlete watching the Olympics. I'm always sitting there and I'm like, man, could I maybe do like power walking like
Yeah.
one day in the Olympics? And then I looked at the times and I was like, oh my goodness, they're walking that? That's crazy. And it's just, you have so much respect for what they do. But then for the athlete to be able to go represent the country and go on a global stage and just be on that podium with a medal around their neck, like that just, it always seemed like that was like such an incredible moment. Like it's cool to watch the confetti come down after the Super Bowl. I wish I could have been one of those guys, but just hearing the national anthem played and seeing someone with a medal around their neck and a big smile, and just it almost seemed just that look of joy and an accomplishment in their eyes, like it's just universal, like the sheer emotion that comes out of it, and it just resonates with me every time I see it. And I'm like, man, that's so awesome.
What I think too is for that one moment, you are literally the best in the world. You are the one of the 1%. And I think that's where that passion, like when one of our team gold, it's like right now we are the best in the world. There's no doubt about it. There's no debate. There's no controversy of for that moment until someone knocks us off that pedestal, we are the best in the world in that event and that person. And when you're a coach that works directly with that athlete, it's in a way, it's like you are one of the best coaches in the world at that moment. And I think it's crazy, man, because you want to stay humble. And I think you don't want to get too arrogant with it. But in my career, it's like the amount of, I think I'm like at 84 gold medals within my athletes or something. I don't even, I lost count, but I like to think of myself as one of those top percenters in that world. And to have those athletes do that, man, is just, it's great for them because when you see that progress, 4 years, man, 4 years is a grind to get these guys ready. And to see that pay off, I think it makes it worth it. And it's a good reminder of why we do it overall and that kind of stuff. But like you said earlier, man, everybody I think has looked at a sport and they're like, I could do that. Maybe I've looked at like badminton and I'm like, I could do badminton.
Yeah.
And then I watch it and I'm like,
You're like,
nope,
what are
they
these?
hit that
This is
thing
insane.
so yeah, like how do you put spin on that freaking thing? Like it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I'm like, nope, never mind. I'm like, maybe if there was a modified version of that, I was like, nope. Shooting was always one that I was like, I could do shooting. I've shot like my whole life. Nope. I'm
Nope.
like, you guys can hit things from and do it while you're moving. I'm like, yeah, nope, I'm good. Just kidding. It is. That's why they always say they always should put that one person in there just for like comparison. The average, put the average
Yes.
Joe in
Yep.
there just to compare
Yeah.
exactly what it is.
Here's what you would look like, maybe at your best. And
Yes.
here's what they're going to do.
Go.
Yeah.
And that's literally what it is, man. So yeah, it's gonna be exciting. And like I said, we're getting to that point of peak and then we taper and then we get ready and that's how it goes.
Sweet, man. Good luck.
Yeah,
Wish you the
definitely.
best, and
That's
thank you for taking the time to chat. It was awesome. I got so many more little things that I'd like to pick your brain on. And
oh, we just gotta have a series, man. We just gotta
yeah,
run it. We
we
just gotta
do.
we have so many things we could hit on.
Yeah,
It,
maybe I
it,
can figure out a name now after this
yeah,
show. It was
yeah,
good.
gotta get it out there.
Yeah, man, Trevis, I appreciate you coming on. If anybody wants to see what you're doing, is there any place you want to direct them to, or do you want them just
Yeah,
to
I
tune
mean,
into the games and watch, or what?
tune into the games and locally, like I said, when I'm here, I reside in Grand Rapids and I work with a clinic at Holt Shepson and any athletes out there that need to get those things checked or want to see what that really looks like. It's nice because I've taken what we do at that clinic and I've literally made it a mini little version of the Olympic Center. We analyze and we dictate and we run gait analysis. I can break apart everything for these athletes, and we definitely are trying to make it a replication of what was done. And the nice thing is to have that credibility to say, "Hey, I've done this before with these athletes is always a one thing. And then other than that, like I said, who knows? Maybe at some point after this career zone of mine, we're gonna try to find some type of system or education system or something through there. We'll get there.
Yeah.
Maybe through the course of these shows, man. Maybe we'll just hit topics and
Yeah, no doubt. Just like
yeah,
we'll just talk about it.
just talk about it and educate it and
Yeah.
get it through there. Get the live callers.
Yeah. Yeah. Caller number 9. What do you have to say?
Right. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool, man. I appreciate you coming on, man. Have a good rest of your day and catching up later.
Yeah. All right, brother.